Like a lot of sewists, I have 1 bajillion notions. And while some of them are really practical and useful, like my rotary cutter, some of them actually bring me joy every time that I use them. And that could be because they're really cute, or they feel really good in my hand, or something about them clicks and they just really work well for me. Hi, I'm Shelly, and I'm a quilter, a long armor, bag maker, sewist, whatever you want to call me. And I'm someone who is very curious, and whenever I go to retreat, I like to look around and see what my friends are using, just in case they've got some sort of special tool that's going to be life-changing for me. That's why in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 favorite notions. These are the ones that I reach for before anything else in my cart, the ones that I use all the time, and the ones that legitimately bring me joy when I use them. I'm going to be showing you each one of them in action, telling you why I love them all, and don't worry, I do have you covered with links for each of them in the description below. Everyone needs a good seam ripper that they love, and for me, it's this little dude from Clover. I looked to see if it had some kind of official name, but I don't think so. I think it's just the white seam ripper from Clover. And of course, there are a lot of different varieties and different types of seam rippers out there, and I have tried a lot of them. But let me tell you why this is the one of choice for me. So first of all, I really like the size of it. I like that it's not too big, it's not too long. And when I hold it in my hand, I like that it just fits nicely in my palm, and I can sort of manipulate the tip of it with my fingertip. I also like that the point on it is very sharp. I've had seam rippers before that had big, flat, wide points on them, and I just kind of wondered what was the point of that? Because when I'm using this, I'm using it in 2 ways. I'm either using it when I'm just working on my own personal quilts when I'm piecing, or I'm using it as a long armor, which PS, long armors do a lot more unpicking than you might know about, but it's a fact. So when I'm using it as a long armor, I really need it to have precise little picking abilities so I can make sure I'm only getting the stitches that I want. And when I'm using it in my sewing room as a quilter, it works really well for ripping through long seams as well. And that's why I always keep this right next to my sewing machine. Just like with seam rippers, you have a lot of different options when it comes to marking your fabric. And I've tried a lot of different options. I've tried chalk markers, regular pens, pencils, I've tried friction pens, I've tried lots of different things, but my life changed when my friend Caitlin introduced me to the Sewline line of fabric marking tools. So this one right here is, I think, my new top favorite out of all of them. And this one they call the Styla Water Soluble Pen. And it's game-changing. First of all, it's cute, so I'm not mad about that when I keep it in my sewing room. It just looks nice next to my sewing machine. But it's got a ceramic ball point on it that is really easy to glide across fabric. So it doesn't take hardly any effort at all for you to trace on the fabric, and it shows up nicely. So that means you don't have to pull at the fabric. It's not going to, I don't know, like tear your fabric. You don't have to push hard. It just glides like butter. And you'll see that the tip of it is a really light blue, but when you mark it on the fabric, it actually turns a little bit darker. And you can use this pen on both light fabric and dark fabric the same. So for me, that's a huge plus that I don't need separate tools for that. And I really like the fact that this one is water soluble. It does erase very easily with just the tiniest spritz of water. So it takes no effort whatsoever. They also make some sort of a tool, I think, that you could use to draw over those lines to make them disappear, but personally, I just like to use a little spritz of water. I love to avoid the use of pins whenever possible. I'm not a pin fan. It's not the pin's fault, it's my fault. I'm always stabbing myself with them and I'm bleeding on my quilt or whatever, so I try and avoid pins wherever possible. But in reality, that's not very possible in sewing. You do need to use pins. And that's where the Zirkle Magnetic Organizer comes into play. This thing is hefty. It is like, it weighs the same as, I don't know, a baseball. So you could use this thing as a weapon if you needed to. That's one plus. I love that the magnet in this not only attaches the pins to the top, but then that means that I can also stick this thing to the side of something metal in my sewing room, which is often my sewing cart. And it works really well for that. So I never have to worry about where did that thing go. First of all, it's big and heavy, so I'm not gonna lose it. But number 2, it's just always stuck to the side of my sewing cart. It's also really fun to use. When you stick those pins on and just let them drop, they all splay to the outside, and sometimes if you're lucky, you get left with one dangling in the middle. Also, last thing, if I drop all my pins on the floor, which happens more than I'd like to admit, I love that I can just use this and wave it over top of the pins on the floor, and they're magically just gonna get picked up and organized and put right back into their pincushion ways. So given that you probably have pins in your sewing room as well, I thought you might like to see a great tool to help you organize them. I'm guessing you're using a rotary cutter to cut your fabric. And if that's the case, then that means you probably have a little collection somewhere of used up old rotary blades that are no longer good for cutting fabric, but maybe they could still have some other use. And if you're anything like me and you'd love to be efficient and chain piece the heck out of all of your sewing, then I've got a tool for you that's going to help you with both of those situations. This is the Blade Saver by Purple Hobbies, and it uses up old rotary cutters in order to help you cut apart your chain piecing. And there's lots of things that I love about this. First of all, it's great for reusing something that you were going to throw in the garbage, so you get a little bit more life out of it in the end. It comes in 3 different parts. So you've got the flower part, and then you've got the base, which breaks apart into 2 different pieces. And you put them together, drop your flower in the middle, and then you can cut your chain piecing apart on any of these little notches in the flower. What's really great about this design is that you can store the flower inside the little magnet, the little case, and now this is safe for travel and it's safe to keep in your sewing room. But I would say it's also pretty safe even when it's out, because it's really hard to get a finger in there. I mean, I guess if you really tried, you could hurt yourself with this thing, but generally speaking, I think it's pretty safe. So I wouldn't be too worried about having this out in my sewing room. But you set it on your table, and it's got neat little gripper feet on the bottom of it. It stays really stable. It stays exactly where you want it to. And then you just cut apart your chain piecing till your heart is content. This guy right here is my absolute favorite. This is the 8.5 by 12.5 Creative Grids ruler. I don't think it has a cool name or anything. I think that's just what it's called, 8.5 by 12.5. And this is by far the most used size of ruler in my sewing room, which is funny because when I go to retreat, everybody's got the 8.5 by 24.5 and everybody's got long skinny ones, but I don't ever see people with this size, and it's my favorite. I love, first of all, that it's got these grippy dots on the back of it. So if you're seeing those dots, those are actual textured surfaces, which means that when you place this on top of your fabric and put pressure on it, just a small amount of pressure, it's not like you have to push down like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but when you put pressure on this, it holds it in place with those little grippy tabs and circles on the bottom. They make sure that your ruler doesn't slip as you're cutting, which was something that I used to really struggle with. And I know that I could put dots and all those other options, but I'm just telling you that when I tried this brand of ruler, something just clicked for me, and it felt like, oh, this is what this experience is supposed to feel like. So my favorite thing about this is that it's a lot wider than a normal ruler that I see people bring to, say, retreats. And that means I can just cut so many more shapes with it. I love it. It hangs really nicely on my easy access wall in my sewing room. It's not too wide to take up that amount of space. It's not too big. It fits in just about any tote bag I have. But most of the pieces that I'm cutting are gonna be smaller than this size. So I like that I can use this to cut a huge variety of different pieces of fabric. Like I can cut up to 10 inches on this without any issue whatsoever. I could cut up a layer cake if I needed to. I obviously have lots more rulers because quilters do be buying rulers, am I right? But this is the one that I reach for the most often and is the one that I find is most useful. So those are my top 5, hands down, favorite notions that I keep in my sewing room. Let me know in the comments below if you use or have any of these and if you feel the same way about them as I do. And if you'd like to know what iron I choose to use and why, you'll want to check out this video that shows you the comparison between 2 popular irons from the Reliable Corporation. And I know that I did not end up picking the one that I thought that I was going to pick, so that was a bit of a surprise to me, and it might be a surprise to you too. Until then, I'm wishing you happy sewing, and I'll see you in the next video.